So yeah, we started talking, and she said, "Do you remember when we were little and my mom would sew them all these little dresses? They were matching dresses. Do you remember that? Fluffy, fluffy dresses. My two oldest girls would be in these matching dresses, and my mom sewed every single one of them. And then she says, and then I start remembering all the dresses she made for me, and the little stuffed animals she made for me and everything, and then I'm looking at her sewing scissors and I just start choking up, and it was really cute. So fun.
Generational connections.
I know.
We're gonna go, well, we are live, so we're gonna just be casual for a little bit.
Okay.
The interviews and everything are starting to
And,
get some more attention.
any other quick little stories?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so many. I think, this idea of connecting the generations. My children were not very old when my mother died, and so, having those little things, she made sure every single one of those kids had something that would remind them of her, whether that was something she sewed or anything. And so they all have a little piece of her, and so they love hanging on to those and looking at them and remembering her. But particularly that sewing story was really special to me. I enjoyed that. So I've lost both of my parents now. I'm only in my 50s and they're both gone, and so preserving those memories has become really important.
How much of the materials or stories have you kind of inherited, or has it been another? Usually it all comes to a sibling. The family kind of takes over some of the stuff, and like personally, I was the one that got it all.
Yeah.
At a tidal wave of material from both parents and my grandparents. But have you gotten that kind of flow back from when your parents passed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my father died last year, and he was on a second marriage. And so when we went up to the memorial, my stepmom had boxed all of his things up, and they were in these big Rubbermaids. And she says, you guys need to take these. I don't want these anymore. And I am the oldest, and I am the most organized. And so, yes, I did inherit those big Rubbermaids full of everything. And I was shocked at the things my father kept. My father was a golfer. My father was a gambler. My father was a coach, a teacher. He was a colorful character. I did not realize that he was maybe even a little bit of a hoarder, because what I found as I started to go through these Rubbermaid containers was his stat books that he kept from every game of golf he ever played, starting at about 14 years old, in these stenographer pads. And he would put the date and the course he played and the hole and what he shot on the hole, and then he would keep those every year. And then he started getting more competitive, and he would keep his opponent's stats in these books. He had kept every book from like 1952 until he passed.
So I'm in those books, and it's not pretty.
Yes.
And he played a lot of golf.
A lot of golf. So the point is, I inherited these Rubbermaids full of a lot of things, and a lot of them were golf stats. And so I had to decide what am I going to keep, what am I going to try to preserve and have available for my children and so forth to look at. So there was a sorting process, because obviously nobody needs that many years worth of golf stats. The other thing I found was the love letters that he and my mother had written, and they were still in their original envelopes, and I pulled those out, and they didn't live together. He was in another city, so they wrote letters, and they wrote every day and sometimes multiple times a day, and the letters were prolific. And I thought, what am I gonna do with these? I started pulling them out of the envelopes. There was almost 1,000 pages of letters from, it was probably March until November when they married. So it was just this massive volume. So I think at first there's a lot of sorting to happen. So then what do you do with all these things that you get? And with the letters, I decided this is a perfect opportunity to use the SHOTBOX, and the reason why is because then I could also preserve the handwriting. I can type really fast, and I could have typed them all up, but how much better is it to have it in their actual handwriting? And so I started pulling these out of the envelopes, and I had to iron some of them to get them flat and put them all in chronological order, and then I started just photographing these in the SHOTBOX in my phone, and there is 1,000 pages of letters. And so what will I do with that information? Right now I've shared those with all of my siblings. I probably will put those on Family Search at some point. Probably wait until my stepmom passes, just because she probably doesn't need to see my parents' love letters. That might be too much, but I'll put those on there, and who knows if anybody will ever read them. I've read quite a few, but it was a great application of using the SHOTBOX for that, because I don't know what else I would have done with them. I wouldn't want to just throw them away, but it was great to be able to keep them. Things like my dad's report cards from elementary school. I got his Letterman letter from his varsity sports. So a lot of things, some things that you can put in a book, other things that you cannot. And so it's great to have the ability to photograph those things and then be able to share them too. Because if I'm the only one that has the material, nobody else is going to see it. But if I do get a picture of it, digitize it for my family, then I can share it with my siblings, my children, and then also have the ability to put some of those pictures in books.
Yeah, you've taken it to the next level.
I
with
have.
these journals, and they're remarkable. And tell us about kind of the creation of these over years of
Yes.
enjoyment in work, but enjoyment and preservation.
Absolutely. So this one is one of the first ones I did, and this one is my mother. And the way this began was she had not written her personal history, and she had a terminal illness, and so I knew that was something that we definitely needed to get, was her personal history. And so I gave her a book of questions, a little spiral bound book of questions with every day a question to answer about something from her life. And so she worked on writing all those stories out, and then at the end of it, she gave me back this spiral bound book with her stories. So that was the starting point for what you see here. So I took all of those and I typed up all of her stories. And then I started going through her photo albums, and that's back obviously when photos were not digital, and I started taking SHOTBOX pictures of all of the pictures that she had, and then putting them together with her stories. And I love this because I've got childhood pictures going back to her parents and their parents, and I love these beautiful old pictures. These are pictures of her father and pictures of her mother, and interspersing that with all of her stories. This is a picture of a rock with a tree on it that she used to go sit on and sing up in the bay in Alaska when she was growing up, where she grew up in Alaska. And so this was just such a fun project to be able to put together the photographs as well as her stories of her family. And it's lengthy. And I really enjoy having these pictures of us when we were children and stories she told about us. So this was my very first project that I used the SHOTBOX for, as well as her stories from her question a day that she did. And then I thought, well, I need to do the same thing for my father. And it took me several more years to get my book of questions back from my father, but I did finally, and then this was the book that was born of that. And as you can see, the very first picture in there is a golfing picture, because that's at Astoria, his very favorite golf course, which he loved so much, that's where he retired to. So that's really fun. The first house he lived in, pictures of his parents, and I love these old pictures so much. They're so precious to me. I remember going to Grandma's house and seeing those rose bushes. And so these are really fun. As we get later in the book, then, oh, and look at this. This is my dad on a Christmas when he was just a little boy. I love these pictures, and having them together with his stories in one place is wonderful. And I've been able to print copies of this for my children, and I have just enjoyed this so much. So, and here's where I come into the picture. So there's my parents with me and my sister, and we're 10 months apart. And so I love these old pictures. And I had to peel those out of a magnetic photo album that they were literally stuck to get them out to use them and to photograph them with the SHOTBOX. So these were my first two projects that I did. Those are both of my parents' books. And so I felt pretty happy that I now had life histories of my parents, and now they're both gone. And so I'm so happy to have them that I was able to use their memorabilia in a way that I could preserve. So that's where it started. But it didn't stop there. It kept going.
And you printed these with Shutterfly.
I did. So as you can see, I have kind of upgraded. This was a company called My Publisher that eventually went out of business. And then these ones that you see here that are more recent, these ones are with Shutterfly. So this one, for example, I did with Shutterfly. When I first started working at the temple president said, you need to write your history. And I thought, well, I'm only 50. Do I really even have a history yet? I thought, well, okay, I'll write the first 50 years. So that's where I started. And so this is my first 50 years book. And I have enjoyed working with Shutterfly. They've got several features that I love. You can either have them place all of your material, or you can do it yourself. And since I have a background in your book, which I did that in high school, was so much fun, I wanted to do my own.
Orem High Tigers.
Oh, go Tigers!
They are playing in the state tournament today in basketball.
Oh, awesome!
Anyway,
That's so
sorry,
awesome.
keep going.
Anyway, so I love they have this feature called a lay flat page so that you don't lose anything in the crack of your published book, which I really like. So on this page in particular, you can see I have my certificate of blessing on this page. I have the little tag and footprints that was on my hospital crib on this page. I have my birth certificate and the birth announcement that my mother sent out. So in a regular photo album, you probably wouldn't have those items. So I was pretty excited to be able to put those in here from when I was born. And so all of these pictures, every single one, up till about, when did we start getting digital cameras? Maybe around 2002 or something. So almost everything in this book is from SHOTBOX. And so I loved doing this project, and then I just wrote my own history to go along with it. So I've been a journal keeper, but I've noticed that journaling and doing your life history are two different things. So that is a project I did with Shutterfly. And then, of course, I decided I ought to do my in-laws because they're getting really old. And, well, that might sound funny. Well, this is the thing. Grandma doesn't remember anymore. And we could see this starting to happen. And so she was in her late 80s, started getting dementia. And one day I had a very strong feeling, go talk to her, get her history. And she wasn't at the point where she could write things down anymore. And so I sat down with my telephone and just pushed record, and I started to ask her questions. And it went okay, but it got a little better when we got out some of her old photographs, and then I would ask her to tell me, what's happening in this picture? Tell me about this picture of your dad with a cow. What's that about? Well, apparently, down where they lived in farm country, they would have county fairs, and they would show their livestock, and they would get blue ribbons. And so I got her to talk about her pictures. And that was actually a really good way for me to get information for her life history. And so I took that recording, went home, transcribed it, gathered all of her pictures, and then I made a book for her as well. And that's this one right here, Janice Parker, Jeff's, and then she's at the point now where we couldn't even have that interview. So that was about 2 years ago that we did that. So even though she's alive, she wouldn't be able to do this. So we did that through the oral interview, which worked really, really well. So, Anyway, I love her book. I love her old pictures. That's what she looked like right about the time I met her. And I went on Family Search and got her family tree with all the pictures and put it in there, which was kind of fun to do. And so I really enjoyed, this is the house she grew up in, which is kind of fancy. It's down in Joseph, and it's on the historic register. She didn't have a lot of pictures from her childhood, but she did have a few. That's probably one of my favorites. She's a twin. And she was the grouchy twin. So, and this has been really fun to do. So I did hers first, and all these wonderful pictures. This is my husband when he was little on Christmas Day. He was the youngest of their 4 boys, all of whom are attorneys. And Christmas is a big deal at their house. So it's just fun to find these really old pictures, favorite pets, all these fun things. So I really did enjoy doing Grandma Janny's. And it was tricky to get, but I got it. And then I had the opposite problem with Grandpa. He had too much to say.
Is this book thicker?
Oh, absolutely. Have a look.
Okay.
Yes. Grandpa, I had to really help, as he gave me all the materials that he had over the years, saying that he was going to write his history, and he had started several times, and then he would get bogged down and not finish it. So he gave me this file full of all these half-started histories that he had done. And I found that, and they were printed on the paper with the dots on the side, from those old printers with the continuous feed paper.
Dot matrix?
Yes, that was the kind of printer. And so I was sorting through all these papers, trying to just narrow down what was he trying to say. And so I got what I could out of all the papers he gave me, and then I again went to an oral interview with him, because he went on at length about the house he grew up in, and the architecture and the plumbing and the landscaping, and even gave me a floor plan of it. And then I asked him about meeting his wife and what their first date was. He could not remember. And then I said, well, when did you ask her to marry you? He's like, I don't really know if I ever did ask her that. We just kind of figured that was going to happen. I said, really? He says, but I tried this case. He's an attorney. I tried this case in 1972. And then he started launching into every detail about this legal case. And so trying to get the information from him that was more personal was difficult, because he remembers all the legal stuff that he did, but not the relationship stuff so much. So I had to do a little digging. So that was a different experience. But again, this is fun. On the back of his, you can see, this is him as a little boy. This is him when he was serving in the war. And then this is him as a young attorney. So it's fun. And he actually ran for county attorney. And I found the flyer that had his platform when he was running for Utah County attorney. And I was able to SHOTBOX that. And his flyer with his platform for his legal, thing was, I have it in here, which is really, really cool to be able to use that. So this is Grandpa Dale. This is my father-in-law and his lovely wife. And so I kind of went through main things, like, tell me about when you were born and what was happening. He was born in 1930. Here's the floor plan of his house I told you about. I actually took a picture of that with the SHOTBOX and put it in here, the floor plan of his house. They slept out on the porch. They had a screened-in porch. They closed in, and that's where they slept. So there he is as a little boy. So it was a lot of fun. There he is when he was in the military. They'd gone out to a base back east. So anyway, so those were really fun projects. And since it was his mom and dad, and I've gotten better at it, and Shutterfly's a cool program, I made little matching books so that you can tell they belong together, which is really fun. So
that is wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and this is a wonderful capture for your kids as well, whether they will appreciate it sooner or later. So we appreciate you coming and talking about your experiences today. Anything else that comes to mind that?
When it comes to family history, I have siblings and family members that are so good at researching and finding people and when they were born in the records and doing all of that wonderful detective work. That has just not ever been my strong suit. That's not been the thing that I'm good at. But what I am good at is finding the stories, finding the memorabilia, and putting it into one place where somebody can look at it and say, oh, really? You know, Grandpa used to work at the ice cream store and he made the ice cream every night, and he can go in at length about how much fat content should be in the ice cream. And this is the thing, interviewing people that are older, their files are thick with information, you know, and so trying to consolidate that down is difficult. But those stories are in here for my children to enjoy and to read for many years to come, and surprising things. Like, I have a book that I did on Bill's grandmother. She got her pilot's license and she rode in a sidecar of a motorcycle, and she climbed down the trellis to marry her boyfriend when she was 15 years old, and they eloped somewhere. And so I just love that I have got these for those stories to carry on with the pictures, because I think the stories without the pictures aren't as cool. I think they're way better with the pictures.